The courtroom doors slammed harder than anyone expected. Amara Collins did not flinch, but every camera turned toward her like she was already guilty. She stood alone. No lawyer beside her yet, no child holding her hand, only whispers filling the hallway. She's the unstable one. She lost custody for a reason. She probably snapped. The judge's assistant stepped forward, a folded paper in hand. Temporary custody revoked. All visitation suspended. Immediate investigation ordered. Amara read the words once, then again, because they felt unreal. Her son Noah had not even been missing for 12 hours. And already, the world had decided she was the danger. She lifted her head slowly and realized something terrifying. No one was looking for the truth. They were looking for confirmation. And she had already been chosen as the villain. If stories about emotional injustice and hidden conspiracies pull you in, stay with this case and make sure you're subscribed. Because what happened to Amara Collins was not what the headlines claimed. And the deeper this story goes, the more dangerous the truth becomes. 3 weeks earlier, Amara's life had still felt fragile, but manageable. She worked long shifts at St. Maron Pediatric Hospital. She avoided the news. She avoided social media. She focused on Noah. Every morning began the same way. Breakfast, homework checks, a quiet walk to the school bus. Noah always held her hand 1 second longer than necessary. He had learned early that stability could disappear. Because 2 years before, Amara and Ethan Reeves divorced after a brutal legal battle. Money was never the real issue. Control was. Ethan wanted complete authority. Amara wanted safety. And the court created a fragile compromise. Shared custody, supervised exchanges, mandatory counseling. A system that looked fair on paper, but never felt neutral in reality. Lena Brooks entered their lives during the custody evaluation phase. Elegant, unconfident, a court-appointed consultant with an untouchable reputation. She specialized in high-risk family restructuring. She asked Amara endless questions about childhood trauma, about stress, about work fatigue, questions that felt less like help and more like surveillance. Every session left Amara feeling smaller. Every report seemed colder. Language like potential emotional volatility, heightened protective tendencies, possible resistance to co-parenting structures. Words that sounded professional, but carried heavy implications, and Lena's recommendations began shaping every court decision. Noah rarely complained. He was observant, sensitive. He drew pictures instead of asking questions. One afternoon, Amara found a drawing folded inside his backpack. 3 stick figures, 1 small child, 1 tall woman, and then 1 faceless adult holding papers. Above the faceless figure, Noah had written, "Court helper." Amara asked gently who it was. Noah shrugged, said nothing, changed the subject. But he began asking unusual questions after visits. Do I have to live somewhere else someday? What if someone tells me you are dangerous? Amara reassured him. But fear had already planted roots. The day Noah disappeared began like every scheduled exchange. Bright lobby lights, security cameras, clipboard check-ins, polite but distant staff. Amara arrived early, always early. She believed punctuality protected her credibility. Ethan arrived late, always late. Confident smile, perfectly tailored suit. Lena Brooks stood near reception that morning, not officially scheduled, but observing, taking notes, watching interactions. Amara felt uncomfortable, but said nothing, because every reaction became documentation. Noah hugged her tightly before the transition. Longer than usual, his voice was quiet. "Mom," What if something weird happens today? Amara asked what he meant. He shook his head, said he was just tired. The staff member guided him away. Amara watched until he turned the corner. And that was the last confirmed moment she saw her son. At 6:40 p.m., Amara received the first call. Noah had not arrived at Ethan's residence. Transportation records showed a delay. Security logs were incomplete. Staff could not confirm who escorted him out of the building. Police were notified immediately, and within hours, the narrative began forming. Mother under scrutiny. Prior custody disputes highlighted. Psychological reports resurfaced online. Old allegations reposted on social media. The system moved faster against her than it moved to find Noah. By midnight, news channels repeated the same headline. Mother with prior custody, issues connected to child disappearance. Photos of Amara leaving court months earlier replayed repeatedly. Edited clips of emotional testimony framed as instability. Experts speculated without evidence. Viewers judged without context. And Amara's identity changed overnight, from concerned parent to suspected threat. Detective Hayes reviewed the case file at 2 a.m. He saw the psychological evaluations, the custody disputes, the emotional courtroom transcripts. Everything pointed toward domestic conflict. And like most investigators under pressure, he followed the fastest narrative. Interview the mother first. Scrutinize her timeline. Assume emotional instability. He did not yet know he was stepping into a carefully constructed illusion. The questioning began calmly. Routine details, daily schedule, relationship history. But subtle accusations followed quickly. Were you angry about the custody outcome? Did Noah ever say he wanted to avoid visits with his father? Have you ever felt overwhelmed enough to act impulsively? Amara answered honestly, but honesty sounded defensive when filtered through suspicion. And by sunrise, the media already reported her as the primary person of interest. Meanwhile, inside the visitation center's security office, a technician discovered something strange. One camera angle from the hallway was missing, not malfunctioning, not corrupted, manually deleted, and the deletion occurred before Noah was officially reported missing. Amara did not sleep. She sat at her kitchen table. Same chair Noah used for homework. Same cup he drank milk from. But the apartment felt hollow. Her phone would not stop vibrating. Missed calls, unknown numbers, reporters requesting comments, friends asking questions she could not answer. One message repeated over and over online. Why isn't she crying on camera? Grief was already being measured like evidence, and silence was being interpreted as guilt. Police held a press briefing at 9 a.m. Detective Marco Hayes stood behind the podium. His words were careful, but the implication was clear. Investigators are currently focusing on individuals within the child's immediate family environment. No names were spoken, but every news outlet ran Amara's photo beside the quote. The narrative tightened. Mother under scrutiny. Custody conflict. Emotional instability. 3 phrases repeated until they sounded like facts. Hayes requested a second interview, longer this time, more detailed. Questions shifted from routine to confrontational. Did you ever express frustration about visitation? Did Noah resist going to his father's home? Did you ever feel the system was unfair to you? Amara answered calmly. She described disagreements, normal parental concerns, nothing hidden. But every answer was typed into a report already shaped by assumption. Hayes noticed something else. She never contradicted herself, never hesitated, But confirmation bias is loud, and consistency sometimes looks rehearsed to someone expecting deception. Investigators returned to the visitation center. Staff were cooperative, polite, structured. They followed protocols, signed logs, recorded arrivals, but one detail stood out. Lena Brooks had signed into the building on the same day Noah disappeared. She was not scheduled for evaluation, not conducting an official assessment. She listed her visit as routine observation. Hayes made a note, then moved on, because the primary theory still centered on the mother. Amara's sister delivered a box from Noah's room. Inside were sketchbooks, schoolwork, dozens of drawings. Detectives reviewed them quickly at first, but one image caught a junior officer's attention: a hallway, a door, and a tall adult holding a clipboard. Beside the figure were small stick cameras drawn on the wall. Above the child's drawing, Noah had written, "Watching Day." The officer forwarded it to Hayes. He glanced at it briefly, then placed it in the secondary evidence folder. Because drawings did not outweigh custody reports, at least not yet. By evening, the internet had turned into a courtroom. Clips from old hearings circulated without context. Mental health discussions were misrepresented. A video of Amara crying during a past custody exchange went viral. Comment sections filled with judgment. "She looks unstable. Kids need structure, not emotions." Maybe the court knew something. The real search for Noah slowed, because public outrage prefers a villain over uncertainty. Ethan Reeves gave a controlled interview. Soft lighting, measured tone. He expressed concern for Noah. He avoided direct accusations, but subtle phrases shaped perception. "I trusted the system. I hope the truth comes out. I just want my son safe." Viewers saw composure. Media framed him as the stable parent. His legal team monitored coverage carefully, and Lena Brooks issued a brief professional statement supporting the integrity of her evaluations. The alliance appeared unspoken, but powerful. Late that night, a financial analyst assigned to the case noticed irregular transactions linked to the visitation center. Consulting fees, private evaluation bonuses, payments routed through multiple family law organizations. Lena Brooks's firm appeared repeatedly, and Ethan's legal company had made significant contributions to one of those organizations months before the custody decision. The connection was not illegal, but it was unusually close. The analyst flagged the information. Hayes received the report. He paused longer this time. The visitation center technician requested another meeting with police. He had reviewed backup servers. Well, one deleted camera angle was not the only anomaly. Access credentials were used after business hours the night before Noah's disappearance. Someone entered the building digitally, downloaded security files, then removed selected footage. The login belonged to an administrative supervisor, but that supervisor had been on medical leave for 2 weeks. Hayes felt the first crack in the original narrative, because a planned deletion meant premeditation, and premeditation rarely fits emotional parental conflict. Amara received a call from an unexpected source, attorney Julian Vance. Known for challenging systemic bias in family court, he had reviewed the media coverage, and the inconsistencies bothered him. He offered representation, not because he believed her automatically, but because the investigation looked too fast, too convenient, and too aligned with past custody conclusions. Amara hesitated. Trust had become dangerous, but she agreed to meet him. Julian reviewed every document: psychological reports, court transcripts, security logs, financial records. He noticed patterns others ignored. Language repetition across different evaluations. Consultant recommendations mirroring legal arguments submitted by Ethan's team. A feedback loop disguised as independent assessment. He turned to Amara and asked one question no investigator had asked yet. Did Noah ever mention being uncomfortable with someone at the visitation center? Amara remembered the drawing, the faceless figure, the clipboard, and suddenly, pieces felt connected. At midnight, a city traffic camera analysis revealed something new. A vehicle left the visitation center's rear service gate 20 minutes after Noah's scheduled transition. No official log recorded the exit. The vehicle belonged to a private transport company frequently contracted by Lena Brooks's consulting firm. And that discovery changed everything. Julian Vance arrived early. 2 coffees, 3 folders, one quiet suspicion growing louder. He spread the custody reports across Amara's table. Language repeated too perfectly. Same phrases, same conclusions, different cases, different families, but always the same consultant name at the bottom. Lena Brooks. He circled identical wording. Emotional volatility affecting parental stability. Boundary confusion under stress. Potential for reactive decision-making. The phrasing appeared like a stamp, not a professional observation, a template. And templates change outcomes before hearings even begin. Julian requested public records, dozens of custody rulings. He filtered cases where Brooks served as evaluator. A pattern formed quickly. Fathers represented by Ethan's law network won unusually high percentages. Mothers described as emotionally expressive lost decision-making rights. Recommendations from Brooks appeared nearly verbatim in final judgments. Judges trusted her reports. Lawyers referenced them heavily. And opposing counsel rarely challenged her authority. Because consultants are supposed to be neutral, and neutrality is rarely questioned when wrapped in credentials. Hayes visited Julian quietly. No press, no official meeting, just questions. Julian showed him the financial analyst's findings. Consulting payments routed through legal advocacy groups, donations from Ethan's firm, speaking fees paid to Brooks shortly before major custody hearings. Not illegal, but deeply connected. Hayes leaned back. His initial theory began to loosen. Because a system can look fair and still be manipulated from within. Julian contacted a woman named Tessa Moran. She had lost custody 2 years earlier. Her case involved Brooks as evaluator. Tessa described a familiar process: friendly interviews, long questionnaires, then a final report that portrayed her as unstable. She requested corrections. They were denied. Her lawyer warned challenging Brooks would anger the judge, so she stayed silent. But she remembered something else. After her hearing, she saw Brooks leave the courthouse with Ethan, not as strangers, but as colleagues, laughing and discussing another smooth outcome. Tessa agreed to testify if needed. Her voice shook, not from anger, from relief that someone finally listened. Julian requested procurement records from the visitation center. Buried inside administrative files was a private service contract, consultation services, security assessments, child transition monitoring. The contract belonged to Brooks Consulting Group, signed 6 months before Noah's custody adjustment. It allowed Brooks temporary access to internal security systems, including camera review privileges. Hayes stared at the document. Because Brooks had both influence over custody outcomes and technical access to the building where he disappeared from. The line between evaluation and control blurred Instantly, Ethan appeared again on television. Calm, measured, sympathetic. He emphasized cooperation with investigators. He avoided mentioning Brooks directly, but he praised trusted professionals who help families through difficult transitions. His legal team issued statements supporting the integrity of consultants. Public opinion stabilized around him, because consistency reads as innocence to people watching from far away, and narratives, once formed, resist change. The security technician returned with new logs. Remote access sessions occurred the night before Noah vanished. User credentials belonged to Brooks' consulting group, not the center's staff. Files accessed included camera placement diagrams, entry and exit blind spots, and emergency access codes. Hayes felt the investigation pivot, because emotional custody disputes do not require security mapping, but planned movements do. Amara remembered a small moment. 2 weeks before Noah disappeared, Brooks visited during a transition. She complimented Noah's drawings, asked him about cameras, asked whether he noticed which doors staff used. At the time, it felt harmless, professional curiosity. Now, it sounded different, targeted, measured, calculated. Julian wrote everything down. Every small memory now mattered. A junior clerk uncovered archived correspondence. Brooks emailed Ethan's office days before Noah's final transition. Subject line: Final stage preparation. Attached files referenced behavioral observation schedules, transport logistics, and contingency pathways. The wording sounded clinical, but the timing felt dangerous. Hayes requested full warrants for digital communications, for financial transfers, for Brooks's consulting servers. The investigation officially shifted direction. Hayes invited Brooks for questioning. She arrived composed, professional, confident in her credentials. She explained her contract, her evaluations, her role as neutral observer. She denied any involvement in Noah's disappearance, denied knowledge of security deletions, denied coordination with Ethan beyond professional boundaries. Her answers were smooth, precise, prepared. But Hayes noticed something. She never asked if Noah was safe, only whether the investigation was targeting her unfairly, and that silence echoed louder than denial. The private transport company responded to a subpoena. One driver recognized the vehicle leaving the visitation center's rear gate. He remembered the night clearly, because he was instructed not to log the trip in official dispatch. He was paid cash, and then he transported a small passenger, accompanied by a woman holding a clipboard. The driver could not see her face clearly, but he remembered one detail: her voice, calm, professional, and familiar from a television interview about family court consulting. Detective Hayes closed his office door. He cleared the whiteboard, started from zero. No assumptions, no emotional shortcuts, only timestamps. Noah arrived at the visitation center at 6:02 p.m. Staff logged him in. Amara signed the transfer sheet. Ethan arrived late, delayed by 15 minutes. Unusual, but documented. Camera footage showed Brooks entering at 6:14 p.m., not scheduled, listed again as routine observation. At 6:39 p.m., hallway cameras went dark. Only 3 angles. Only for 9 minutes. Enough time for a quiet movement. Enough time for a planned exit. The rear service gate opened at 6:46 p.m. No alarm triggered, no staff authorization recorded. The transport vehicle entered through a blind spot. Hayes replayed the footage frame by frame. A small silhouette walked beside an adult figure, clipboard in hand, face partially hidden by shadow. The child appeared calm. No struggle, no resistance, which meant trust, and children only walk calmly with people they recognize. A maintenance worker came forward. He had been repairing a light fixture near the service hallway. He saw Brooks speaking softly to Noah. She told him they were taking a quick tour. She mentioned Ethan's name, said his father asked her to help with a special evaluation. The worker assumed it was official. He thought nothing of it, until he saw the news days later. His statement shifted the case from suspicion to structured deception. Hayes received a call from Internal Affairs, questions about investigative direction, concerns about targeting court-appointed professionals, warnings about public trust in family systems. The message was subtle, but clear. Proceed carefully. Do not damage institutional credibility. Hayes hung up slowly, because truth does not always align with reputation, and institutions rarely admit vulnerability without resistance. Julian found an overlooked motion filed months earlier. Ethan's attorneys requested expanded psychological monitoring for Noah. The motion cited long-term emotional development concerns. The judge approved limited observational authority for Brooks. The wording allowed supervised interactions outside formal sessions, a legal door, and wide enough for manipulation, narrow enough to appear procedural. Julian highlighted one phrase: transport assessments permitted under consultant discretion. That single line became the foundation of the plan. Amara sat through interviews, reviews, legal briefings, but her mind stayed with Noah's last smile. She remembered how he trusted adults, how he believed rules meant safety. She replayed their final hug, wondered if she missed a warning sign, wondered if the system had slowly erased her authority until Noah trusted strangers more than her instincts. Julian reassured her, but guilt is quiet and relentless. Ethan met Brooks in a private conference room. No cameras, no assistants. The conversation was tense. He asked whether the investigation could link them directly. Brooks insisted her actions remained within legal gray zones. She said the transport was behavioral observation, temporary, protective. She claimed Noah was safe, but she refused to say where. Ethan's calm exterior cracked slightly, because control feels powerful until it becomes exposure. Cyber investigators recovered deleted messages, encrypted but partially restored. One message from Brooks read, "Phase 2 complete. Transition successful. Monitoring begins immediately." Another message referenced financial escrow accounts tied to consulting outcomes, performance bonuses linked to successful custody transitions, incentives disguised as research grants. The language felt clinical, but the meaning felt cold, because children were being moved like strategic assets. A private storage rental surfaced in Brooks's financial records, paid weekly, located outside the city. Investigators obtained a warrant. Inside, they found temporary office equipment, surveillance monitors, child behavioral tracking forms, and a portable sleeping cot sized for a young child. No Noah, but proof of an interim holding environment, structured, prepared, planned long before the disappearance. Hayes sat alone after the search. He replayed his first interview with Amara, her calm answers, her steady grief. He remembered how easily the narrative formed: mother under stress, custody conflict, emotional instability. He realized how quickly bias becomes direction, and direction becomes accusation. He made a decision. The case would now be classified as coordinated child abduction under professional authority. Late that night, Julian received an anonymous email. No sender, no signature, only an audio attachment. A child's voice, soft, tired, asking when he could go home, and an adult voice responding gently, "Soon. Your mom needs more time to prove she's safe." The adult voice belonged to Lena Brooks. Julian played the file again. A child's quiet voice, slow breaths between words. "Can I go home now?" A calm adult voice responded, measured, clinical. "You need more time to adjust. Your mom must prove she is safe." The tone felt rehearsed, comforting on the surface, controlling underneath. Forensic analysts confirmed the adult voice matched Lena Brooks. That single file shifted the case. No longer disappearance. Now confirmed unlawful custody manipulation and possible psychological coercion. Cyber investigators traced Brooks's encrypted files, buried under research labels, behavioral adaptation, parental attachment restructuring, and environmental response training. But the deeper they looked, the clearer the pattern became. Children involved in contested custody battles were placed into controlled environments, separated temporarily from one parent, observed under emotional stress. Reports generated to support predetermined legal outcomes. It was not therapy, it was influence, packaged as science. Julian discovered escrow accounts tied to Brooks's consulting firm. Payments released after favorable custody rulings. Bonuses increased when courts reduced maternal custody rights. Most transfers came from advocacy organizations, but several linked back to legal partnerships connected to Ethan's network. Indirect, layered, difficult to prove intentional coordination, but impossible to ignore. Because incentives change behavior, and money leaves trails even when disguised as research funding. For weeks, Amara had reacted, defended, endured. Now, she changed direction. Julian filed a motion accusing Brooks of unlawful removal, psychological exploitation, evidence manipulation. Amara stood before reporters for the first time, her voice steady, her message simple. This was never about parenting. It was about control. Public sympathy began to shift. Slowly, carefully, because people resist admitting they believed the wrong story. Internal pressure increased. Supervisors warned Hayes about institutional fallout. Family court consultants held powerful influence. Professional networks extended into city leadership. Hayes responded with a sealed warrant request, targeting Brooks's primary research facility. If denied, the investigation might stall permanently, and if approved, it could expose everything. The judge signed the warrant just before midnight. The location sat beyond city limits. A converted counseling retreat, neutral paint, soft lighting, playrooms designed to appear therapeutic. Investigators entered quietly. Rooms were clean, beds made, monitors disconnected, records partially erased. But one room contained detailed emotional logs. Children's reactions recorded daily, fear levels, attachment responses, statements about parents collected under guided questioning. The environment looked clinical, but felt experimental and ethically broken. Inside a locked cabinet, investigators found transport schedules, coded names, movement routes, temporary holding periods. One code appeared repeatedly, the NV7. The same code appeared in Brooks's encrypted emails near the date of Noah's disappearance. A child specialist reviewed the files, confirmed NV7 corresponded to a 7-year-old male participant. Transfer date matched Noah's final visitation day, which meant Noah had been part of Brooks's program long before he vanished. The disappearance was not sudden. It was planned integration. Ethan sat alone in his office. News reports changed tone. Questions surfaced about consulting practices. Legal analysts debated ethical violations. He replayed conversations with Brooks, the language she used, adjustment periods, protective relocation, data-driven parenting outcomes. He convinced himself the program was legal, that it protected children. But doubt moved slowly through him, and because good intentions do not erase harm when control becomes deception. Investigators recovered additional recordings. Noah's voice appeared in multiple sessions. He sounded tired, confused, asking when he could see his mother. Each response guided him gently away from attachment, encouraging independence from Amara, encouraging trust in structured caregivers. Amara listened once, then removed her headphones. Her eyes closed, not from weakness, but from a deep understanding that her child had been emotionally isolated by professionals he trusted. One transport record listed a recent movement, not to the main facility, but to a private residential program near a coastal town. The transfer date was only 3 days old. Hayes organized a search team immediately. Julian prepared emergency custody restoration paperwork. Amara waited near the command center, not pacing, not crying, just breathing slowly, because hope returned carefully, and hope carries its own kind of fear. As investigators prepared to leave, a technician accessed a dormant remote camera. One room appeared briefly on screen, a small bed, a stack of drawing papers, and a child sitting quietly near a window. He looked older, more distant, but the drawing in his hands read, "Mom, I'm still here." The convoy moved before sunrise. No sirens, no flashing lights, only quiet urgency. Detective Hayes reviewed the warrant again. Child recovery authorization, emergency custody suspension, immediate seizure of program records. Julian sat beside Amara in the rear vehicle. No conversation, only steady breathing, because hope felt heavy, and reunion carried fear. The building looked harmless, and a converted learning center near the shoreline. Pastel walls, wooden playground, calm music leaking through open windows. Signs described it as a developmental retreat. But investigators knew what hid beneath the language: controlled observation, behavioral influence, isolation disguised as therapy. Hayes signaled the team forward. Doors opened quietly. Staff froze when they saw badges. Some stepped back immediately. Others demanded legal documentation. Julian handed over court orders. Clear, precise, irrefutable. Rooms were secured one by one. Children sat in circles. Coloring books open. Counselors watching closely. Every child looked calm. Too calm. Trained calm. And that silence felt louder than panic. A junior officer found the room marked NV7. Hayes entered slowly. A small boy sat near a window, drawing on folded paper. He looked up, eyes older than his years. Recognition flickered slowly. Not the sudden joy Amara expected, but cautious memory, as if trust required permission. Hayes knelt gently, said Amara's name. Noah's hand tightened around the crayon. His voice was soft. "Is she allowed to come now?" Amara stepped into the room carefully. She did not rush, did not overwhelm him. She knelt a few feet away, spoke softly. "I'm here when you're ready." Noah watched her for several seconds, then stood, walked slowly, and wrapped his arms around her. The hug was quiet, careful, protective, as if he feared sudden separation. Amara closed her eyes, not crying loudly, just holding him with steady calm. Because children need safety more than celebration. Back at the main office, staff contacted Lena Brooks. She instructed them to refuse document access, claim ongoing clinical confidentiality, delay the investigation, buy time. But the warrants were clear. Records were seized. servers disconnected, encrypted drives catalogued. Brooks attempted to leave the city hours later. Airport security detained her under emergency legal hold. Her influence ended the moment documentation became public. News alerts flooded Ethan's phone. Live footage of the facility. Children removed under court supervision. Legal analysts discussing systemic abuse. He watched Noah walk beside Amara. The boy looked quiet, withdrawn. And Ethan realized the program had done more than protect. It had reshaped a child's emotional world. He met with Julian voluntarily, provided emails, meeting notes, consulting agreements. He admitted trusting Brooks without questioning long-term consequences, and because believing expertise felt easier than challenging authority. Counselors interviewed multiple participants. Patterns emerged quickly. Repeated language discouraging attachment to targeted parents. Guided questions framing one parent as unstable. Reward systems for expressing independence from family bonds. Children described feeling watched constantly, encouraged to journal thoughts about loyalty, and slowly taught to doubt memories of safety at home. It was not therapy, it was narrative engineering. The reunion room was quiet. No reporters, no cameras, just soft lighting. Noah slept close to Amara, woke several times, asked if someone would take him back. She answered each time calmly, "No one is taking you anywhere without you knowing." Trust returned slowly, not through promises, but through consistent presence, and because safety must be repeated before it feels real again. Hayes submitted a full reclassification: criminal conspiracy, child endangerment, evidence manipulation, professional fraud. He included documentation showing initial bias against Amara, a rare admission, but necessary, because emotional injustice begins when systems accept easy narratives and ends only when truth becomes uncomfortable enough to confront openly. Late that evening, Julian reviewed seized financial ledgers. One entry stood out: a private foundation funded by multiple legal firms, including one previously connected to Ethan's extended network. But the largest contributor remained anonymous. Encrypted ownership, hidden through international accounts, which meant Brooks had not acted alone, and someone more powerful remained unseen. And Julian stared at the encrypted ledger again. One foundation appeared repeatedly. Not public, not searchable. Funds moved through layered legal channels. Every payment ended in Brooks's program accounts. Detective Hayes pushed for deeper forensic tracing. International banking partners responded slowly. Then, one ownership shell cracked open. A single executive signature appeared: Harlan Pierce, family court reform advocate, philanthropist, public champion for child protection laws, and a man who had testified as an expert in dozens of custody trials across the country, including Amara's. Pierce's foundation funded research, training seminars, judicial conferences. He shaped how courts interpreted parental risk. His reports recommended Brooks's program as an advanced intervention model. On paper, it looked like progressive reform. Behind the scenes, it created a pipeline. Consultations led to evaluations. Evaluations led to removals. Removals fed data back into Pierce's research, which then justified more removals. A perfect loop. Self-reinforcing. Profitable. Prosecutors confronted Brooks with the financial chain. Her attorney resisted at first, but evidence mounted. Emails, contracts, transport authorizations signed under Pierce's consulting arm. Brooks admitted Pierce designed the theoretical framework. She ran the operational side. He provided legitimacy. She provided results. And courts trusted the system because it carried academic credibility. Ethan appeared before investigators, no lawyers speaking for him. He described seminars Pierce hosted and pressure on attorneys to adopt data-first custody strategies, language that reframed maternal attachment as emotional dependency, subtle persuasion, not overt coercion. He admitted referencing Pierce's reports during Amara's case, not to harm her, but to appear modern and evidence-driven. That admission cut deep, because emotional injustice often grows from professional ambition disguised as progress. At home, Noah spoke little. He followed routines carefully, asked permission before small actions, even when unnecessary. Amara worked with child therapists independent from Brooks's network. No forced conversations, no pressure to share memories. Just consistency, meals together, quiet evenings, short walks. One night Noah asked, "Was I bad for missing you?" Amara answered simply, "You were never bad for loving me." Healing began there, and small, honest, unrushed. Prosecutors assembled a federal-level investigation. Charges expanded: conspiracy, fraud, professional misconduct, unlawful detention of minors. Pierce attempted public damage control, press conferences, statements defending innovative therapy. But victims' families came forward. Stories matched patterns. Same language, same consultants, same removal timelines. The narrative shifted from isolated incident to systemic exploitation. Senior officials warned Hayes about political consequences. Pierce had influence in legal reform circles. Some judges resisted acknowledging past rulings influenced by flawed science. Hayes continued anyway, filed supplemental reports, requested independent oversight, because credibility matters more than comfort when children are involved. And institutions earn trust only when they admit mistakes openly. She spoke calmly, not as a victim alone, but as a mother, navigating systemic bias. She described how language in court framed her emotions as instability, how evaluation questions assumed guilt, how every attempt to defend herself was interpreted as resistance. Panel members listened closely, because emotional injustice often hides in procedural language, and exposing that language changes future cases. Forensic teams recovered deleted audio from Brooks's private server, a strategy meeting between Brooks and Pierce. No threats, no violence, only discussions about maximizing compliance outcomes, accelerating attachment recalibration, maintaining judicial confidence. The words sounded clinical, but the implications were clear. They knew children experienced distress. They calculated acceptable emotional impact in pursuit of legal outcomes. And that calculation crossed ethical boundaries. Federal prosecutors announced a joint indictment. Brooks, Pierce, and multiple consultants tied to the custody program. Trial date set. Public attention returned intensely. But just hours before the announcement, an anonymous source leaked a claim suggesting Amara had prior undisclosed legal issues, a smear attempt, a final effort to undermine credibility, which meant someone inside the network was still fighting back. The federal courthouse filled before sunrise. Media trucks lined the street. Families sat together in quiet rows. Some held photographs. Others held notebooks full of timelines and memories. Because this was not one case anymore. It was a system on trial. Amara entered quietly. No dramatic gestures, and just steady steps beside Julian. Across the aisle sat Lena Brooks. Calm expression, perfect posture, and behind her, Harland Pierce, the man who built an empire using professional language and institutional trust. The prosecution spoke first, Clear voice, no theatrics. They described a custody model built on manipulation, a network disguised as therapy, children used as data points, parents labeled as unstable when they resisted. They told the jury this was not reform, it was control. The defense followed immediately. They framed Brooks and Pierce as innovators, misunderstood pioneers, professionals trying to help high-conflict families. They warned the jury about emotional bias, said grief can distort perception. Said critics fear change. 2 stories, both convincing, only one grounded in truth. Former clients took the stand. Some parents who lost custody quickly after Brooks's evaluations. Their stories matched. Rapid recommendations, limited independent review, language in reports that felt scripted. Children encouraged to question one parent's love. Defense attorneys attacked credibility, highlighted minor inconsistencies. But patterns matter more than isolated details, and patterns were impossible to ignore. Prosecutors presented Noah's drawings, simple images, a courthouse, a clipboard, a figure with a smile that did not reach the eyes. The jury saw repeated phrases. Follow rules or you leave. Don't say you miss home. Experts explained how children express fear through symbols. Defense objected, claimed emotional manipulation. Judge allowed the evidence with careful instruction. Because children's voices deserve representation even when words feel difficult. Ethan walked into court, visibly changed. No designer confidence, only responsibility. He described how Pierce influenced legal strategy, how Brooks's program promised quick stability, how he believed data without questioning methodology. He admitted prioritizing professional image over parental instinct. Defense attempted to portray him as vengeful. He did not argue. He accepted mistakes openly. And honesty carries weight when accountability is genuine. Defense attorneys attempted psychological pressure, rapid questions, interruptions, accusations of emotional instability. They referenced early courtroom transcripts, moments where she cried, moments where she raised her voice. But Amara remained steady. She acknowledged pain without apology and explained that fear for a child is not evidence of danger, only evidence of love. Her calm shifted the room. Because composure under pressure reveals authenticity. She spoke with clinical precision, used academic terminology, presented charts showing improved compliance metrics. Prosecution asked simple questions. Who defined compliance? What emotional benchmarks were considered acceptable? Why were dissenting therapists excluded from review? Her answers grew slower. Because data loses power when human impact becomes visible. Prosecutors played the hidden recording. Pierce discussing acceptable emotional distress levels, strategic language about narrative realignment. Defense claimed context misunderstanding, but email chains confirmed intention. Financial incentives tied to successful custody transfers, the consulting fees rising with program expansion. The jury watched silently because the voice on the recording sounded confident, not confused, and confidence revealed awareness. Prosecution spoke last. They reminded jurors this case was not anti-reform, not anti-therapy. It was anti-manipulation. They asked the jury to protect children's emotional integrity, to protect parents from systemic bias. Defense warned about punishing innovation, said emotional reactions could damage future progress. Both sides rested. Silence filled the courtroom. The decision moved to 12 ordinary people, carrying extraordinary responsibility. Jurors entered deliberation. Hours passed, then days. Media speculation intensified. Families waited in quiet corridors. Noah stayed home with Amara, drawing again. This time, houses with open doors. But on the third evening, a juror requested clarification on conspiracy law definitions, meaning disagreement existed, meaning the outcome remained uncertain. The courtroom reopened before noon. No noise, no speculation, only quiet footsteps and waiting eyes. Families filled every bench. Reporters lowered their voices, because the story had moved beyond headlines. It had become personal for thousands watching from outside. Amara sat with Julian and Noah's therapist nearby. Her hands rested calmly on her lap, not shaking, just still. Across the room, Brooks and Pierce avoided eye contact with anyone, even each other. The clerk called everyone to stand. 12 jurors walked in slowly. Faces neutral, no smiles, no anger, just the weight of a difficult decision. The foreperson held a folded document. The judge confirmed readiness. The one question echoed through the room. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor. Conspiracy to commit professional fraud. Guilty. A ripple of breath moved through the courtroom. No cheering, no gasps, just relief mixed with disbelief. Because systems rarely admit their own corruption. Yet here it was, spoken clearly, publicly, recorded forever. Child endangerment through institutional manipulation. Guilty. Brooks lowered her head slightly. Her attorney whispered urgently. Pierce stared straight ahead, still, unmoving, but his jaw tightened, because the language he once controlled had turned against him. Obstruction of justice, professional misconduct, financial conspiracy. Each verdict returned the same answer. Guilty. The judge thanked the jury for their service. Sentencing scheduled for a later date, but the emotional verdict had already landed. Not only for Amara, for every parent who felt dismissed, for every child whose voice had been redirected. Amara did not cry immediately. She closed her eyes, took a slow breath. Julian placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Outside the courtroom, media waited for statements. But she declined interviews that day. Healing required quiet first. Noah met her in a private waiting room. He asked only one question. Does this mean nobody can take me again? She answered honestly. It means the truth helped protect us. Because safety grows from trust, not from promises alone. Weeks later, Brooks and Pierce returned to court. Victim impact statements filled hours. Parents spoke about lost time. Children spoke through recorded messages. Experts described long-term emotional consequences. The judge delivered a measured sentence. Years of imprisonment, loss of professional licenses, mandatory restitution funds for affected families, not revenge, accountability, structured, legal, final. Ethan worked quietly afterward. Pro bono legal work for custody reform victims, publicly acknowledged past mistakes. Some forgave him, some did not, and both reactions were fair. Trust returns slowly, through consistent action, not dramatic speeches. He never attempted to reclaim old influence. Instead, he chose humility, because emotional injustice often teaches the hardest lessons through personal failure. Therapy focused on rebuilding confidence, small decisions, choosing clothes, picking bedtime stories, expressing disagreements safely. One afternoon, Noah invited a friend home. His laughter sounded natural again, unscripted, free, when Amara watched from the kitchen, not controlling, just present. Because healing does not erase pain. It simply teaches the heart how to carry it differently. Legislators reviewed custody evaluation standards. independent oversight boards formed. Programs required transparent methodologies. Parents gained access to second opinions automatically. Judges received updated training on psychological bias. Hayes testified before committees, admitted investigative oversights openly, because accountability at every level prevents future injustice, and progress happens only when institutions listen to those they once ignored. Months later, Amara spoke at a small conference, not as a victim, as an advocate. She described emotional language used against parents, encouraged professionals to question their own assumptions. She reminded everyone that children are not data points. They are people with memories, with loyalty, with hearts that recognize truth even when systems fail. One evening, Amara and Noah walked along a quiet park path. No reporters, no courtrooms, only conversation about school projects and favorite snacks. He ran ahead, turned back, smiled, and waited for her to catch up, because safety had returned, not perfectly, not permanently guaranteed, but real, earned, protected by truth that refused to stay hidden. 6 months passed, without headlines, no cameras outside Amara's door, no legal letters waiting in the mailbox. Silence returned slowly. Not empty silence, peaceful silence, the kind that allows a nervous system to rest. Amara learned how to live without constantly preparing for another court date, and Noah learned that routines could exist without evaluation forms attached to them. One afternoon at a school event, Noah laughed loudly, a spontaneous sound, no hesitation, no scanning adults' faces for approval. Amara noticed immediately, because before, he used to pause after laughing, as if waiting for correction. That day, he did not pause. He simply kept laughing. And she understood something important. Healing does not arrive in dramatic moments. It appears quietly in everyday freedom. A letter arrived from another parent, a single mother who had followed the trial from afar. She described losing custody years earlier under similar recommendations. She said Amara's story gave her courage to request case review. Attached was a court order granting new evaluation. Amara read the letter twice, then again, and because emotional injustice spreads silently, but so does courage when someone speaks first. Julian transitioned from defense work to policy reform. He collaborated with child psychologists outside institutional networks, helped draft legislation requiring independent expert panels, created legal guides for parents entering custody disputes. He told Amara once, "The system changes faster when survivors help design it." And she began attending workshops quietly, not as a spokesperson, just as a listener, learning how stories transform into structured reform. Hayes visited months later, not for investigation, just coffee. He admitted how easily institutions trust established reputations, how investigative assumptions once blinded him to emotional nuance. He now trained younger detectives on bias awareness, on listening beyond official reports, on recognizing that manipulation sometimes wears professional clothing, because learning publicly helps others avoid repeating private mistakes. Ethan requested a brief meeting, not to seek forgiveness, only closure. They met in a neutral cafe. No tension, no raised voices. He spoke about accountability, about understanding how ambition can overshadow empathy. Amara listened quietly. She did not offer absolution, but she acknowledged his ongoing work supporting reform. And sometimes, emotional closure means recognizing change without rewriting the past. They left separately, both lighter, both aware growth remains ongoing. One evening, Noah brought home a school project, A presentation titled, "My Safe Place." He described home, friends, walking with his mother after dinner. He spoke confidently in front of classmates. No scripted answers, no therapy language, just honest words. His teacher later told Amara, "He trusts his own voice again." And that sentence carried more meaning than any courtroom verdict. New national standards emerged. Transparent evaluation methods, mandatory child advocates independent from therapy programs, review boards, including former clients, annual audits of custody consultants. Pierce's research lost credibility. Brooks's methodology studied only as a cautionary example, because progress often grows from confronting uncomfortable truths openly, and emotional injustice loses power when procedures become transparent. At a small legal reform conference, Amara accepted an invitation to speak. No dramatic entrance, no rehearsed slogans. She simply shared lessons learned, that love can be misinterpreted through clinical language, that fear should never be labeled instability without context, that systems must listen before diagnosing. She ended with one quiet statement. Children do not need perfect parents. They need honest systems that protect their bonds. The room stood silently afterward, not out of admiration, out of reflection. A year after the verdict, a warm afternoon, Amara and Noah sat under a tree, reading together. No therapy schedules, no legal documents, just a storybook between them. He leaned against her shoulder, comfortable, secure. The camera of memory pulls back slowly, not focusing on past pain, but on present safety. Because justice is not only punishment, it is restoration, it is learning. It is the quiet rebuilding of trust after truth finally wins. And sometimes, the strongest victory is simply the chance to live without fear.